Sydney Van Bulck is a West Ashley resident and a former Charleston County School District teacher who now wants to become the next Charleston County Council member to represent the constituents of District 7, mostly West Ashley. I talked one-on-one with Sydney about the issues for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Sydney Van Bulck, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, thank you for having me. I always look forward to talking with you.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, I spoke with you 2 years ago when you ran for the Charleston County School Board. And at the time, obviously, you were a teacher, but wanted to represent the school district and the students and teachers and faculty members at the time there. But now you're back on Quintin's Close-Ups because you are a candidate for Charleston County Council's District 7 seat, which covers...
It's mostly West Ashley. If you look at the maps, it's actually the most gerrymandered district out of all of the county council seats. But if you're looking at West Ashley, it's kind of a U shape. He's cut out one area over by Earth Fair, and then we've picked up the neighborhood of Wando Woods in North Charleston. Okay. So it's a wonky looking district, right. But it's got a great, just a great community within it. So I'm excited.
Why Charleston County Council? Why now?
Sure. So you did mention that I ran for school board 2 years ago. And I think that a lot of people that know me from that race. And when I ran for school board, I was just coming out of the teaching profession, as you mentioned. And I really realized that I could have been a strong voice on that school board, a voice for educators. And at the time, it just felt like the right thing to do. And that race obviously didn't turn out the way that we had anticipated. And so when that race ended, I kind of just reevaluated and looked for other ways to get involved in my community. Service has always been really important to me, no matter what level it's on or where I find that. And so I've gotten involved with a lot of different organizations and really had found peace in serving my community in that way. About a week or two before the filing deadline, we realized that Brantley was going to run unopposed this year. And 4 years ago, he ran basically unopposed. And so that would have been 8 years where the people of West Ashley and North Charleston didn't have a true voice, a true choice when going to the polls. And I really felt like all voters deserve the option of a choice when they go to vote. West Ashley tends to get ignored and forgotten about, and the same with North Charleston. And so I just felt like this was a time for someone who's not a career politician, someone who has lived paycheck to paycheck, someone who's a renter and understands the need of affordable housing. It was time to have that voice on county council. And so here we are.
Here we are. And I want to break down all of that in just a second.
Sure.
But let me get to this. How do you make District 7 competitive today, Sydney, so that Charleston County can actually be better tomorrow?
It's actually a very competitive district. Even though Brantley's run unopposed in the past and, well, essentially unopposed. The makeup of the district when it comes to Democrat and Republican is basically 50-50, even with the gerrymandering. And so it's a very competitive race. He definitely has a little bit more name recognition. Not all of it good, not all of it bad. So the way that we're making this keeping this race competitive is doing a lot of really hard groundwork. So we're out on the streets every day. We're knocking doors. We're making phone calls. We are meeting with groups in the community, making sure that the voters of District 7 know that they have a choice and that there's truly a different vision for West Ashley.
Going back to that last question, how do you make District 8, as far as those issues, competitive today so that Charleston County as a whole can be better tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've noticed when I'm watching county council meetings, when I go to them, is there's a lot of like in my district and that district, but truly when you get elected, you serve yes, you're elected by your constituents within your district, but you're serving the entire county. And so it's really important to have open dialogue with people who live outside of your district so that you're making decisions based on what's best for each individual community. So if I'm taking a vote on an area in Mount Pleasant, it's really important that I've listened to the people of Mount Pleasant, people in those neighborhoods, the people in that area to understand how these votes are going to affect their day-to-day life. And same with if it's a vote for Johns Island, if it's a vote for James Island, when we're talking about specific communities, making sure that those are the voices that we're really listening to, the people who are going to be affected by each voice.
What exactly are you listening to when you go to Mount Pleasant, James Island, Johns Island, even here on the peninsula?
Yeah, so a lot of different things. Each community kind of has different needs. And so, and even like if you're looking at John, it's hard to say because if you're looking at John's Island, you can't just like not all of John's Island's going to agree, and different parts of John's Island need different things. And so you're really kind of looking at how each decision will affect the immediate group and then how it affects outward. So specifically like traffic and issues. So if you're making a decision about one intersection, you can't just look at, okay, how is this going to affect traffic right here, but how will it affect traffic a mile down the road? How is it going to affect traffic on the other side of Johns Island? You've got to really make decisions based off of all of those pieces. A lot of the votes that come to county council have to do with zoning. And so it's really, especially when you're looking at our historical districts, our historic neighborhoods, listening to the people who live in them. You know, if you have a community that has been there for generations on generations, and you've got big developers that want to come in and build, it's going to forever change that area, right? And so we have to make sure that we're not just listening to the money side of things, but that we're looking at humanity and the people and what the communities are asking for. So if a community comes to county council and asks for protection, it's our job to find ways to protect them. It's also our job to work with builders to make sure that we are having enough housing. Obviously, we have a huge housing crisis here in Charleston, but doing it in a way that's responsible to the people of Charleston, to the communities that we serve.
Traffic wise, on Johns Island, where exactly should flyovers be right now?
Well, specifically right where we're coming into Johns Island, you know, one of the biggest traffic holdups is right off of District 6, which is Kylon's district, but at Main and 17. And it's not that far from my house, and I go to Johns Island all the time. So I know very well that if certain times of the day, you're going to sit there for quite some time. That project is just now about to get started. Unfortunately, there was a vote taken 2 weeks ago, I think, to remove the bike and pedestrian piece of that, which is really devastating because when we're talking about roads, we need to be talking about whole roads. Not everyone in Charleston has a vehicle, and when we are building new roads, we need to make sure that we are keeping safety in mind. And I know that there's a cost portion to that, and I know that South Carolina Department of Transportation didn't want to take responsibility for that piece of it, but to me, the buck stops here. So if the county wants to make the investment in making roads, we need to make sure that we're making full, complete roads that are available for everyone.
Well, let me
And
ask you this. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry about that.
yeah, no, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Why doesn't the county's 2024 $5.4 billion transportation sales tax have tens or even hundreds of millions in repairs reports for roads and sidewalks?
Sorry, say the first part of that question again. Why?
Yeah, why doesn't the Charleston County Charleston County County's 2024 $5.4 billion transportation sales tax have tens or even hundreds of millions in it for repairs for actually roads and sidewalks?
So, you know, that's a question for people who are on county council right now. I think that when we're looking at Charleston County as a whole, and when we're looking at the roads and the plans, sometimes the people who are making the decisions aren't really necessarily taking in mind a different class of people. And so when you're looking at people, environmentalists who just choose not to have a car, but then also a group of our community who doesn't have a car, we live in the 21st century, and we tend to, as a society, believe that everybody has a car and can just jump from point A to point B, but that's just not the truth or the reality, especially in a city and a county like Charleston. A lot of our constituents rely heavily on public transportation, which is not always the most reliable and not always connects point A to point B. And so I think that this is just a group of our constituents that tend to get forgotten a lot of times.
Well, how many people in that particular area actually have bicycles versus cars?
Ooh, Quintin, that is the number. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I mean, I talk to constituents all the time who are concerned about this. I've been knocking on doors, and the one of the biggest questions that I get asked is safety. Especially the North Bridge, the Cosgrove Bridge. That's a really intense point for my constituents. And whether you have a car or not, people tend to have like very strong feelings about this because, I don't know how often you travel over that bridge, but I'll be driving over it at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and there'll be somebody walking down the center of the bridge because they're going to work or coming home from work. And there's no sidewalk at all on that bridge. And so the only way to cross it is through the center of that bridge, which is incredibly dangerous. It's dangerous. I mean, it's obviously dangerous for the people who are crossing it, but it's also dangerous for the people who are driving. It puts everybody at risk. And it's just really unfortunate and unsafe. And, we should have had that bridge a decade ago. But unfortunately, we have a county council member who doesn't want it and has not been fighting for it.
And to be fair, I'm going to interview Brantley Moody on Wednesday to get his side of the story on this as
Yeah.
well. But temporarily wise, what should be placed there over the North Bridge until a new bridge is actually completed?
Oh, I think that easily, it's 3 lanes. And so I think that we could for sure figure out a way to make one of those lanes bike ped for now until the bridge can be completed. But the important thing to note is that bridge is not going to get completed unless we get the federal grant money. And the only way that we get that federal grant money is if the county lobbies the state and then the state lobbies the federal government. And right now, that's just simply not happening.
Well, let me ask you this then. What should the county council do besides speak to the state government?
Well, that's what they need to do. The only way that this is going to happen, the only way we're going to get that federal grant is if the county asks our lobbyists to speak to the state government and have them lobby on our behalf to the federal government. That's the only way we get that grant.
And I want to get back to that in just a second, but you mentioned earlier about Johns Island, obviously portions of that, actually the bike and ped path being removed from portions of that island. What would you replace that with?
I wouldn't replace it. I would put it back into the project, the proposal.
How much is that?
It's expensive, but it's not even the cost of building it. The issue, the reason that the county removed it from the project is just the maintenance of it. And so the county does not want to take on the responsibility of maintaining that. And I feel like that's really unfortunate. And I know that everything costs money and you've got to make hard decisions. But I think when we're making hard decisions, the safety of our constituents should absolutely be at the top of that.
So who should the county actually hire to help maintain that?
Well, there's a couple of different options. So the city is actually interested, or at least that's kind of been talked about right now, that potentially the city is interested in taking that on. And so going into a partnership with them would obviously be the best choice. But certainly we could outsource that by any means.
So if you outsource that, how much would that be costing the county?
Quintin, I don't have that figure on me right now.
Now, let me go back because obviously, as we talk about Johns Island, I don't know if you know this, but obviously back in 1999, there was a plan, a suburban rural area edge, which was established as a tool to delineate the rural area from the urban suburban area. So what is that edge right now when you think of Charleston County, particularly in your district?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, if you're looking at West Ashley, most of the most of the development stops around Bees Ferry. If you're looking at West Ashley kind of as a whole, that's around where we're looking at the end of our major developments.
Speaking of development, should there be flyovers at Glen McConnell on 526 and also at Sam Rittenberg and Highway 61?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I live off of 61, and so those are two intersections that I travel often, and it's just incredibly dangerous. When I think about, like, there's a lot of different responsibilities that county council members have, but I think safety is at the top of it. Like the safety of our constituents and the frequency in which we're having accidents, and um, it's not safe. So yeah, I do believe that we should definitely invest in that.
Well, how many accidents are there currently right now in that area of 61 when you think of it on a daily basis?
I mean, I couldn't give you a number. I don't stand out there and count it daily, but it's frequent. I mean, it's very often.
Now, what would be your solution to that?
I mean, I think the flyover is a great solution, but there's also other solutions. I think about the intersection of Magwood and 61.
Right.
There's also a lot of accidents there, and it's a traffic holdup spot as well. So if we're thinking about commuters, if we're thinking about like time and traffic and safety, that intersection right there is actually the perfect opportunity for something like a traffic circle. And so, I mean, I personally am not a traffic engineer, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have absolutely every answer to these types of questions. I think that it's irresponsible, and I think that it's simply unhonest for people like myself to sit here and say, like, oh, I have every solution. But what I do have is the ability to make relationships with people who are much smarter than I am in those departments. And so I would lean heavily on road engineers to come up with very smart, fiscally responsible plans that would be as cost effective as possible, but also fix our traffic issues and make our roads safer.
But what smart physical plan do you have?
Oh, well, like I said, I wouldn't want it. I personally would not want a county council member who said, I have all of the answers. I think that, like I said, I think that's dishonest. And so, and I think is unsafe. Like I don't have a background in engineering or and so I think that the responsibility of a council member is to lean on the professionals that have studied these things intensely and listen to the science behind it and make sound decisions based off of that.
Well, let me ask you this then, Cindy. What relationships have you have actually developed with those Charleston County Council or Charleston County employees?
Yeah, sure. So I've made great relationships with a bunch of our city council members, and I've reached out to Department of Transportation, several people within that organization. And the key is to have good relationships across different municipalities, because a lot of the roads that are in my district are going to be state roads or they're going to be city roads. And when it comes to things like that, like county council can't just make unilateral decisions based off on roads that aren't within their power. But when you have a constituent that comes to you and says, like, I have an issue with this road, I also don't think it's my responsibility to say, oh, well, that's not my job. That's city or that's state. It's my job to contact them and say, all right, so we're seeing this issue. It's in my district, but it's a state road or it's a city road. And let's come together. Let's sit down and let's look at the problem and let's find a solution. And if we need to find some county money to pay for it, then we can work on finding a solution there. If we can look for federal grants, let's do that. But bringing all of the different municipalities together to find solid solutions, I think is the key there.
I want to get back to that in just a second, but let's go to 526. I'm running out of time, unfortunately. But there's still no money for the 526 extension, and County Council seems reluctant to inform the citizens of an actual financial plan. In your opinion, should they sever the 526 part from the rest and see if the citizens really want to spend $2 billion or more on 526?
Yeah. So this is probably, there's a lot of things that my opponent and I disagree on. And I think that this area is one of the biggest. And the difference between Brantley and myself here is that he has a very strong opinion on this, and anyone who disagrees with him, he gets very frustrated with. And I believe that a project that is this large and this expensive and will affect this many people, good or bad, I don't think it should be decided by 9 people. I think it should be decided by the county at large. And so I am glad to see the referendum on the ballot in November. But just like you said, I have concerns. I have concerns that other projects aren't going to get funded because of 526. And I have concerns that when people go to vote in November, they're not going to really know what that referendum is for because the wording is misleading. So, yeah, I do wish that there had been 2 separate referendums. I think that it would have been a more honest approach, and I think that it would have given us a better understanding of what the county wants. I think that there are a lot of groups that are both pro 526 and anti 526 that are trying really hard to get that message out. And so I do hope that when voters go to the polls in November, that they understand what that question is, and then we see how the county votes on it, and then that's how we move forward. But to answer your original question, yeah, I do wish that it had been 2 separate questions, just because I, as a human, as someone who wants to represent my constituents, I think that transparency and truth should always be at the forefront of everything. And just personally, like, my belief is that it is misleading a little bit.
In what way should the county draft the referendum language for I-26?
Oh, I think it should have, like you stated, I think it should have been a separate referendum that specifically addressed 526, that specifically addressed the approximated cost of it. And here's the thing is we don't really know what it's going to cost, because this is not a project that's going to be completed quickly. At a bare minimum, it's going to take a decade to get it done. And we're seeing the price of these projects grow exponentially. And so who knows by the end of it what it's going to cost the taxpayers. So yeah, I think that a referendum that had that kind of language in it, that had specifically stated that that's what it's for, would have been preferable. I think that there's a lot of people that are going to be torn on the vote because they want the green space, they want the sidewalks, they want, all of these other things that are mentioned in it. But I think that being clear to voters about the priority that council is putting 526 on that list, it should have been more clear so that voters know exactly what they're voting for in November.
So how many projects do you have currently in your district
That are happening right now?
right now?
None that I'm aware of.
Let me ask you this. What should be county's approach to making certain that no county or public funds are actually used to promote the passage of this particular referendum?
I mean, that's an ethics issue, like, I think that if we truly want to know where our constituents stand on it, it should stand on its own. I mean, point blank, like, county money should not be used to push out their own agenda on something that we're asking the people to vote on.
What other expenditures, Sydney, do you foresee with this 526 project?
Oh gosh, I mean, so right now, I was a former teacher, that, but I work for a construction company, and I don't, shocking, I don't actually do the construction, but I work for a family who does construction. And the cost of materials, it fluctuates frequently. So we never know what that is going to cost, especially, 10 years down the road, who knows? The cost of labor, especially you look at a place like Charleston where the cost of housing continues to rise. The cost of labor is going to continue to rise. And so it's all part of a messy puzzle. And so finding these solid answers to questions like how much is it going to cost, truly, we don't know. We can estimate, but we don't know the X factors.
Well, I want to get back to that in a second as well, but what preliminary work do you actually expect before this project is actually shovel ready?
Well, I think that they are, they're putting the plans together right now. just going to the county council meetings, it does sound like they're getting close to being ready to start. Um, so they've got to get the plans finalized. Obviously, like the last meeting, it was contentious about the pedestrian path. And so there were conversations had about, meeting with city to see if they would be willing to take that on. So if they're going to put that back in, that'll, slow things down a little bit.
How much would that slow it down by?
Oh, and you know what, Quintin? I am mixing up my different road projects in my head.
Oh,
So that I'm talking about the flyover. Sorry,
oh,
the
no worries.
526, the 526 project.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't believe will be ready anytime soon.
Well,
There's a lot of planning that has to go into it.
yes, ma'am.
Department of Transportation has to be on board with it. There's a bunch of moving pieces. There are people who are going to lose their homes off of it, and so there's a lot of different pieces over this puzzle.
What environmental impacts do you foresee with 526?
Massive. There's a lot of environmental, especially going over the Stono, like into the West Ashley area. James Island, they're going to lose a huge portion of the James Island County Park.
Right.
So the environmental impacts are large. So when we're looking at this project, like I stated earlier, I don't believe it's my job to make that decision for the people of Charleston County. I think that it is the role of our citizens to come together and make that decision together. It's a huge, this is not adding a stop sign. This is not changing a stoplight or adding an extra lane somewhere. This is something that will transform the landscape of our county forever. And so I do believe that this should not be chosen by 9 individuals, and that we really need to hear from the people of Charleston where they stand on it.
Where do the people stand in your district on 526?
Very mixed. It is, I would say, probably about 50-50. Some people, and Quintin, when I say that, that's honestly probably not true. I think that the people that have strong feelings about it one way or another, it's about 50-50. But the reality of it is that the people in my district are more concerned about things that are right on their front doorstep. And so when I've been knocking on doors, every once in a while, I'll have a voter ask me about 526. But the question that I hear the most often is, what are you going to do about flooding in our neighborhoods, especially the Church Creek area? Like, our district has been widely overlooked for a long time. So we're talking about flooding. We're talking about potholes. We're talking about sidewalks near schools. Like, we are talking about basic infrastructure close to the front door steps of people. That's what they're more concerned about than 526. There certainly are a large group of people who are concerned about 526 in one way or the other. But I think that in our district, largely, people are more concerned about what's happening right on their front doorsteps.
But do you believe that those particular projects and those issues that you just mentioned might be delayed by 526?
Yes. We have a finite amount of money, right? And so if we are holding on to all of the money to get this project done, it will absolutely affect the smaller projects along the line. And to be fair, there are other issues that stall those projects. We've got to do a better job of working with contractors. Like, we can get some smaller local contractors to do some of these smaller projects, but right now there are issues with the county that make it harder for these smaller companies to come in and do these projects. So a lot of times we can't get these projects done simply because we can't find someone to take a bid on them. And so we've got to find ways to work with our local subcontractors to get these smaller projects finished.
How many smaller projects need to be finished in your district right now?
Quintin, I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but I think the biggest one is the flooding infrastructure, and that's happening across the district all over. We also have an issue with the drainage overflow when we have sewage, when we have flooding, the sewage going into people's yards. I think that's very frustrating for a lot of my constituents. I get asked about that a lot. That's not a county issue, but I think that's a Charleston water system, and I'm actually taking a class with them right now. But I think that what we can do is on like the county level is work with Charleston Water to see what they need. How can we make this project run faster, smoother? If we can help them find some federal funds for it, those type things. Because, like I said, it doesn't fall under the purview of county council, but those are still our constituents, and it's important that if they are having an issue, that we are working with the people who can fix it to make sure that we can streamline it as best as possible.
Where would you streamline it right now?
So, I mean, it is a very costly project. Like, it is not cheap. It is in the millions of dollars. And it's going to be paid for out of a private company. And so I think that one place that we can start is looking for federal grant money that could potentially offset some of that cost and could maybe potentially make that project run a little quicker.
So if you offset those costs with those federal grants, how much would that then obviously have the county pay for?
Well, if the county's not paying for it, the Charleston Water System is who's paying for the project. And so if we can help find some funding outside of it, especially through grants, that type thing, it'll help our constituents because if the Charleston Water System has to pay for this project, who pays for the Charleston Water System? We do. And so I think that just working with them, standing next to them and saying, lean on us. How can we support you? What do you need from us to make this project go smoothly? And just being there to reassure our constituents that it's happening, passing information along, building those relationships. I think it's all very important.
What relationships have you built with the Charleston Water System?
Well, like I said, I'm taking...
You're taking the class, yes, ma'am. But what relationships?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the CEO has been there for every class so far. And so just getting to know him and working, but not only that, but getting to know like people on all levels of the water system. They've been really good about bringing in the people that are really on the ground and doing the work. And so we did a tour of the water treatment plant last week. If anybody who's watching this hasn't taken this class yet, I think they do it once a year. It's open to anyone who wants to take it. And it has been very insightful into how our water is treated to make sure that what we're getting is safe. I highly recommend it to anyone. And I do know that we are in very good hands. So just making sure that they have what they need from us to make everything go smoothly.
Are any constituents in your district actually cleaning out ditches?
Oh, yeah. So when the tropical storm hit about a month or so ago, one of the things that I noticed, just being on Facebook and kind of perusing the neighborhood Facebook pages, is that people were out cleaning their own drainage pipes. People were pulling weeds out of it. And, like that shouldn't be on our constituents to maintain our roads. Like we have people, whether it's Department of Transportation or whether it's county council, whether it's city, like we all need to be working together to make sure that these things are taken care of. Absolutely. Because right now it's kind of every man for themselves, and that's not how it should be.
Let me go to something else because I want to ask you this. What's more important for District 7? Is it building new homes and commercial space or rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing the existing homes?
All of the above. So, Quintin, this is one of the reasons why I decided to run. It's one of the reasons why I ended up leaving the teaching profession because I couldn't afford rent anymore on my teaching salary. And when we're looking at housing in District 7, the cost is rising rapidly. And so I think a really good example right now is the Sumar Street project, which is city, it's not county.
Right.
But it's going to be a mixed use space. There's going to be housing, there's going to be townhomes, which, the missing middle, there's going to be apartments. So I'm not necessarily against that project. I think there is some misleading information in it when it comes to attainable housing. There's only about 34 apartments that are classified as attainable housing out of the 400. And they are all one-bedroom apartments, and they're priced around $1,600 a month. So if you're talking about a teacher or a firefighter or a police officer or the person working at the Publix that's going to be in that shopping center, they're not going to be able to afford that. And so if, I understand that we need this project to get started, to get the TIF rolling. And If we're going to use that TIF to build attainable housing, then I understand that piece of it. But I do believe that there needs to be more transparency and honesty with our constituents on what this really looks like. Because if you're looking at housing as a whole, if like the Sumar Street apartments housing, that's going to be luxury living, and so the price of those apartments are going to boost the price everywhere else, right? So if they're charging $3,000 a month, I mean, that's just a figure I'm throwing out. I don't know what they're going to charge for the larger apartments, but let's just say around $3,000 a month for an apartment. Then the apartment down the road that's charging $1,500 a month can up their prices because they're cheaper than these luxury ones, you
Okay.
know? And so there's all of these different pieces that come into attainable housing. I think we have a lot of opportunities. One place that my opponent and I actually agree on is that the Citadel Mall would be a great place for some housing because it's right there. There's already built-in infrastructure. It's right by 526. It's right by Sam Rittenberg. It's right by 61. So when you're looking at traffic, that's a great place to put some larger facilities.
Okay.
We have an issue with flipping in West Ashley, and so you'll have these homes that would have traditionally gone for like 150, 200,000 that are now being sold for twice that. So I looked to buy in 2019, and the same duplexes that I looked at have more than doubled in price, and so
Yes.
we're looking at a complicated issue.
Yes, ma'am. I'm running out of time, unfortunately. But have you had a conversation with Brantley about the misleading information about Sumar Street? Have you had a conversation with Councilman William Tinkler or even Councilman Carl Brady about this?
So I have had numerous conversations with William Tinkler. I actually have not spoken with Brantley, but I mean, this is a city project, and so I
Right.
actually spoke with William Tinkler the day after the big neighborhood meeting about it, and I shared my concerns with it. And he under is very understanding about my concerns, and we kind of talked about why it's important to get the TIF started. And if we want to do other projects. And so I understand that there are multiple pieces to this, but I do believe that we need to be transparent.
So if you start a TIF, how soon would it be before the county actually sees money from that?
Mm, that's a great question. Not soon. If a lot of the tips that are out there right now, like we're still not seeing the money come back from it yet. And so it's not a quick process by any means.
Sydney Van Bo, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Always great to talk with you.
Likewise.